Welcome to the Jets UK podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Andres Groves, and I'm joined by one of my co-hosts, Matthew Merrett. Matthew, how are you doing today?
Yes, Sanchez, I'm good. I'm good. We are back. I'm still dealing with the slight injustice of Chelsea losing the Carabao Cup final on the weekend, so I'm looking forward to distracting myself and talking to some Jets. So buzzing to get back into it. It's our season, isn't it? It's our time to shine. The New York Jets. We are ready to go. We've got free agency 2 weeks away now, straight into the draft. So there is a lot to chat about.
There is. It is definitely much our season, and we're finally back. We've had a little bit of we were supposed to come back after the Super Bowl, but we've had a bit of a bumpy start getting back into the season. We've had a few scheduling issues, but we're back now, and we're really, really excited. Just one thing to say about David is that he's currently about to move house, and he's got a lot of things going on at the moment. So he's going to be in and out over the next couple of weeks. Hopefully he'll be here for like some of the more important ones, maybe like the free agency recap episode, things like that. We'll try and get it on, but we have to oversee kind of work around his, he's going to be pumping out all that content that you see he puts out as well as everything else that's going on at home. So he'll be back and forth, and hopefully we'll have a bit of a clearer picture as we go towards the draft and after the draft. So but yeah, we're really excited to come back for the season. This is a really exciting season when you look on the foundation of what we built last year, and how things rounded out in terms of as we look into year two of some of these rookies coming into year two, and none more so than Zach. It's a really exciting period with all the assets we have. What we can have is we were really excited last year. I think this is, if they do a good job, as good a job at surrounding the team with talent and putting good talent in the team, I think we could have a really exciting season this year.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case for Joe Douglas so far. It's almost a tale of two drafts, isn't it? The polar opposites, as it were, as it currently stands, of course. And obviously, hopefully, we all hope that kind of 2020 class kind of begins looking better and better through this year. But if we can kind of replicate that 2021 draft, and we'll obviously dive into talking about the draft a lot more over the coming weeks. It's only going to point up, and it's a tough division. But the other three teams in our division all changes. 3 new offensive coordinators. Yeah. Question marks over there. We've got the consistency in our coaching staff in the building, so hopefully there will be a foundation, and we can kind of kick on. Yeah,
it's about time. It's been a long time since we've been able to have a steady bit of success, and so. Yeah, I mean, even in the Rex years, it wasn't steady success. So, if we can actually aim towards, steady success and being competitive year in, year out, that is really the goal. And hopefully this is the first year where we can really start to show how difficult we can be on a Sunday and not get destroyed on some weeks like we did last year. So hopefully it's the first year of the new Jet fandom, a new Jet team. Let's hope that. So on today's episode, we'll be talking about the picks at 4 and 10, having a deep dive conversation about the options there, the strategy that we'd have for those picks, and kind of just a general chat about them. It's obviously been something that we're all talking about on Jets Twitter, on social media. So I think it's just good just to kind of get our points and have a bit of a discussion about that. And that's going to be the basis of the show. But before that, we'll get into a little bit of news. Okay, so this week is obviously Combine Week, and there is news there, that will be breaking, and there'll be performances that we'll be seeing, something we'll be talking about on next week's show. But on this week's, it's obviously based around the Combine a bit, and the first bit of news is that's been going around Jetsland is that the coaching staff won't be attending the Combine. It'll be Joe Douglas and his team, and the scouting team will be there. And there's been kind of mixed response to that. I mean, Matt, what's your feelings about it?
I think looking at it holistically, the NFL is evolving, particularly in this time of year, in terms of, as a result of the pandemic, in terms of from that 2020 draft where kind of working from home, kind of video reviews, kind of dialing in, not needing to have those in-person meetings as much. It's a step forward, and it's kind of this continuous step. I'm personally someone who doesn't completely buy into some people slag off the on-field workouts completely. I think they're still a great differentiator for for measuring teams and measuring prospects even, and teams really do use them and kind of analyse them. But the bottom line is you don't need your staff in the room to kind of look at someone. That tape is all available. And I think at a critical point where the Jets are in terms of trying to evaluate as many people as possible as quickly as they can, if they feel like, and it's a coach's decision and it's a Robert Saleh decision, if he feels like he's going to get more out of not being there and being able to invest his time in kind of free agency film review, draft film review, kind of that wider lens, that's absolutely what he should be doing. So I think it's his decision. I think it'll be interesting to see over the coming years whether more and more teams do that. The Rams kind of started this trend, although as we know they don't really like their picks, do they?
They
Anyway,
don't have any draft picks anyway.
They don't have any draft picks anyway, so there's not much point going there.
Yeah.
I think the combine's really interesting. I think the Jets will really want to hammer into those interviews, and it'll be interesting to see whether they feel they miss out on something. And obviously, I doubt we'll ever find out the answer to this, but not having Saleh in a room with a person, is that going to negatively impact how those interviews go? You'd hope not, and you'd hope there'd be enough learnings after the last 2 years with virtual interviews that they can still run the same process and still get the results that they want to. But I think it's a great opportunity, and they're actually speaking today, Saleh and Douglas. I think they're speaking this afternoon, so interested to hear what they have to say. I'm sure they'll be asked a lot of questions about the draft and how they're kind of feeling going into free agency. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, the couple of thoughts I have is one, obviously they were at the Senior Bowl, so for a good amount of the prospects that are coming out, they got a really hands-on kind of they got a hands-on test of what these guys are. Obviously not got the underclassmen, but obviously last year's kind of meetings of the scouting team and the coaching team, where they kind of discussed ideas of exactly what players that the coaching staff would want. That scouting team will carry obviously all those learnings into this year's draft as well, and be able to focus on the type of players they want. And I think Joe Douglas and Saleh have the same idea of the type of mentality of the player that they want. So I think it's kind of a bit about nothing really. We're talking about it, but I think it's not that important. I think when you look at everything, and I think the most important thing, and when you talk about the things changing, you got to look at the schedule, and how the schedule has been bumped up now because of the extra week and the bye week. Everything's been pushed back now, which makes it's tighter between the end of the season and the start of the new league season, when you've got to get all your kind of self evaluations done, prepare for free agency, get all your pro scouting done. So I think with them spending a lot of time down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, they already spent a lot of time with this draft class, and I think they've kind of said, we need to get back to the pro side of it and work out what we do with our team and the pro free agents, and then let the scouting team do their job, and they have that trust because of that kind of melding of minds that happened last year. So I'm feeling very confident about it, and I think there's not a big issue at all about it really at all. So yeah, it's what it is, and like I said, we'll see what Joe Douglas and Saleh say in terms of at the combine. We'll see how these prospects show up. There's a few interesting ones that you're looking at certain drills for certain individuals and seeing if they can achieve and answer some of the questions that we have of them. So yeah, obviously the combine is always an interesting part of the draft process. So the other bit of news this week is obviously the teams that were announced for London as the home game. So obviously the Jaguars got theirs and the Saints are another one, but the Packers is one that's interesting because we're scheduled to play the Packers away this year. So from the looks of it, and I may be mistaken, but it looks like there's 3 teams that qualify kind of for it. And there's the Patriots, the Titans, and the Jets. We were here last year. They came to London last year. What's your feelings about whether the Jets could come to London, and who do you think it might be?
I reckon they'll probably line up the Patriots for it. If they can get Packers v Patriots as a London game, that's it. The thing that might give the Jets the advantage, and obviously I'm sure there is great hesitations and perhaps even resistance about sending the Jets twice in a row. I don't think that's ever been done before, with the exception of the Jaguars who come every year. The question would be, because the Jets chose to have the marketing rights for the UK, would they actively try and ask for it, pursue it, see if they can get it? prefer to play the Packers in London, where they've got this kind of marketing commitments and kind of desire to get marketed, or would they kind of resist it in the sense of they'd rather stay in America, kind of not have to deal with that kind of semi-bye week, where even though you have your bye week following your trip to the UK, it's still like you're still readjusting to time zones and all of that. So we shall see. I mean, of course, we'd all love to see the Jets again. It'd be great to have them back.
Yeah.
I appreciate that some American fans would rather not have to deal with them coming over 2 years in a row, especially those who have connections to Green Bay and would like to go and see them in the iconic Lambeau.
Yeah.
But from our point of view, bring the Jets over here. We'd love to have them here. We'd love to see them again. We'd love to kind of continue those meetups, kind of keep that same energy.
Yeah.
So let's see how it plays out. I mean, it's not in our hands. All we can do is wait and see, but looking forward to it. And I think one of my best friends is a Green Bay Packers fan, so I'll probably be at that game regardless.
Yeah.
So
we both have that. So that'll be an interesting game for both of us if that was the case. Yeah, I think it's an interesting one. I like you. I think it's the Patriots, which is a third friend in my trio of friends is a Patriots fan. So it's kind of an interesting chat we've been having. I do think it's the Patriots. I have a hunch, but the Jets is an interesting one. Like I said, the rights, they may want to push for it, and obviously staying away from Green Bay, away in Lambeau rather than in a somewhat neutral venue that the Jets are. They've just gone through the process. They know the process. All the players have been through the process, and the Packers have never been to London ever as an organization. So it's not even
the
like
final team.
They're the final team, and so there could be a competitive advantage in that. As much it would suck for. I've already heard some of the Jets community excited for the trip to Lambeau, potentially, and so that would obviously be not great for them because obviously it's a great stadium and a historic stadium to have a chance to watch the Jets play the Packers there would be great.
They did have pre-season just gone.
Yeah, they did. It's different.
They had that.
It is, but the vibe is different.
Turn.
Come on, the vibe is a bit different for an actual regular season game where everything's on the line. So we'll see. That'll be announced. They say in due course. I think it'll be like May. We're looking at the announcement for that. So yeah, we will wait with bated breath and see what's lined up for the Packers in London. So I think for that we'll wrap it up and we'll head to our discussion about the 4th and the 10th pick. Okay, so to discuss the 4th and 10th pick, they are it's a big talking point. I think before we start, I think there's a few things we'll kind of slot in first to kind of frame the conversation a little bit. It's kind of our direction of where we would think we'd like to go in free agency. Nothing too specific, players wise or contract wise, but just a general idea of where you would like to hit, maybe where you would like to focus certain places. One thing to be aware, if anyone isn't aware, is that the draft class as it currently stands will cost just shy of 20 million on the cap this year because of those 2 first rounds, 2 second rounds. It's quite hefty. So when you're thinking about who to sign, you've got to factor in quite a big chunk of that draft capital for that. So I mean, I'll kick it off with just my general feelings is that I would rather, in terms of free agency, I don't mind not going with any of the big fish if I can get with those kind of, with the cap being not endless amounts. I would rather spread the cost on a lot of those really good quality players. Maybe get one top-notch player, maybe like a Dalton Schultz or someone like that. Someone that's kind of really kind of a little bit higher than the rest of them, but mostly really good for good quality players that kind of fill out the quality of the squad. And so there's really plug the holes is what I want to do with players who are good. If not great, and then that means when it turns to the draft, you can then focus a little bit more on if a great value falls to you, you can go with it because you're just upgrading a position and you're not saying, I have a desperate hole at one position I have to go with, and I have a decent, I could upgrade this, but I have a massive need here. That's the general feelings I've got. What's your feelings about free agency generally?
I think you've nailed it there. The absolute worst case scenario for the Jets is to go into those first 2 days of the draft and having to find players to fill desperate needs. So if it's almost like the 2020 draft where it was telegraphed that the Jets needed a left tackle and they were going to take that at 11, and there was obviously worst case scenario was that one of the tackles didn't fall to us, and that's why Joe Douglas was thinking about making a trade with Jacksonville to move up to 9 in that draft. So avoiding those situations and just filling out the holes. I think for me, where I'd be looking for the Jets to add is players on both sides of the ball who can make an impact on the ball. So on defense, we've got to find a way to get more takeaways. There were so many times where we could force this kind of bend not break mentality, and like we kind of gave up long drives. You've got to find players at corner, at safety, and at edge who can kind of get to the ball and make plays on the ball. So that might be interceptions, that might be forcing a fumble, that might be causing a sack, all of these different things. And I think the good news is that particularly at safety, there are those players, and I mean the list. I think Jesse Bates will probably get franchise tagged, because the safety franchise number is so much lower than other positions.
And the Bengals have a lot of cap as well. The Bengals have a lot of cap space,
But someone like Marcus Williams might be that guy. Justin Reed from Houston. There are options at safety to fill those gaps. At cornerback, I think, as I've spoken about before, that some people want the Jets to go out and get this bona fide CB1, this all-star. And perhaps if they do, someone like Carlton Davis is absolutely perfect. That role, long rangey, still kind of young, grown into his prime, and could be that guy. But again, is he a franchise tag candidate? We'll find out. Edge rushers, there's a couple of edge rushers out there. If you're looking for someone to kind of join that rotational pass force that the Jets like to run, with players only seeming to get a maximum of 60% of snaps on that defensive line in games. And building out that position, I think if Sheldon Rankins gets cut, has there's been some discussion floating around, and I personally hope he doesn't, but we'll see. Kind of fill out that defensive line. On the offensive line of the side of the ball, I think the kind of conversation begins at tight end, and it's a deep tight end class, and there are players you can go out and get. I mean, we're all talking about Dalton Schultz, but as we know, JD doesn't really he'll set a price and he won't get stuck in a bidding war. So if that bidding war goes to Schultz, look to the Jets to pivot and add one or two, like a David Njoku, an Ojo Howard, a Robert Tonyan, Max Williams. There's these names who are out there. So there's opportunities for the Jets to get a lot better. I think we'll see them be fairly aggressive on day 1 and day 2, day 3, that beginning of free agency, as they kind of build out the roster. And it's going to be exciting. I mean, this time last year, none of us were talking really about Corey Davis, and he became a Jet. Now I was talking about Jared Davis. So we'll see how it goes. It's going to be exciting, and it kind of helps frame all of those discussions going into the draft, because despite all of it's almost a cliche to say it now, despite all of the draft discussions that are going on, we have to wait and see what happens in free agency before we really have a clear idea of how they might attack the draft.
I think that's the free agency period is going to be very interesting in terms of how they attack it. I think last year they got very good value for the contracts. Of course, injuries, obviously scuppered the value, quality of that with Carl Lawson. But I think if you look at what they offered, the deals when they came in, I think those deals were good value deals. They weren't kind of going to cane us down the line. I think they were good value, good worth, good value for money deals. And I think that's where we're going to be hitting. We're not going to be going way above and doing what the Giants did with Golladay and with the cornerback. I forgot his name that they signed.
Bradbury.
No, the other one that he signed, the one from Tennessee, I forgot his name. But yeah, they spent stupid money last year, the Giants, and obviously that's why they've got a change of kind of GM and head coach now. So I think it's really about kind of hitting those like mid-level to kind of the second-level players and filling out the squad with those players, and I think that's going to put us in a really good position to really utilize the great draft capital that we have, and we can slide down and not worry about, did we miss this player? If we miss this player, we're not in dire straits because we've still got a decent person in free agency who can do a job, and maybe we hit it next year. We just have to make sure that we just cover all the bases, I think, to some level. I think that's just an interesting. Obviously, we're going to get into all this with our free agency preview. We'll be looking at some of our favorite players, maybe some of the people that we're thinking of at that second and third level that could do a decent job. We'll get into all that obviously in the coming weeks as we head towards free agency. But I thought it was good just have a general framing before we head over to the draft strategy. So you were talking before on off air about the draft strategy that you're thinking about for the draft. Do you want to present that?
Well, I guess it kind of begins with an analysis of this draft class, and this has kind of been spoken about at length, and it's perhaps not the golden draft class that we've been spoilt with over the last couple of years, and it's a much more tightly bunched group. And this is not to say there's not players in there who won't make a significant impact and won't make a significant difference, but I think particularly across picks 1 to 75, it is a tightly bunched group. And while there are tiers in there, they are a lot closer than we've seen in previous years. Like last year, for example, those first 15 or so picks down to players like Elijah Vera Tucker, Mac Jones, those are all kind of a cut above what we're looking at in this class. And Aidan Hutchinson and Evan Neal and Ekwonu and Kayvon all have top tier potential, but I just don't think they're kind of those gold standard players. The gold standard players in this class are of positions which are traditionally interpreted as less important positions. I think Linderbaum and Carl Hamilton are the only clear cut number ones at their position, and they play safety and centre. So you've kind of got those question marks, and as a result,
and even those guys, I don't think that either of them, even though they're really good prospects, I don't think either of them are generational prospects. Just that sometimes you would leap above the value proposition to take them because you're saying this is a safety. You don't normally go top 10, but this is a generational safety. What we thought with Jamal Adams, centre has never been taken at top 10. You take one in the top of the first half in the first half of the first round because you think it's a generational position, someone who's going to be just like the top level Hall of Fame trajectory kind of player. I don't know if those guys are quite there yet to kind of balance against that value proposition. Yeah.
So what I was saying is obviously when you have such a tightly bunched group, it makes a lot of sense to kind of trade back and kind of slide back, and you're still getting an equivalent value player but adding more picks. But ultimately, it's the same draft class for everyone, and there's not going to be as much demand to trade up. Obviously, it's been spoken about, could Pittsburgh trade up to 10 to try and get a quarterback? And perhaps that happens, but I think you're going to see less trades as a result in this class because there's the same equivalent or not as big a value drop-off if you sit in your pick and you wait to make your players, which is okay, and the Jets have to deal with that. The other flip side of this coin is the Jets are coming off 2 years where they've had very large draft classes. In 2020, they took 9 players. 2021, they took 10 players. Those are beefy draft classes. They're punchy numbers, and what this means is Joe Douglas is going to have to kind of assess whether he wants to add such a big draft class again. And I think as a result, the Jets could be, and it's not getting spoken about too much, but particularly using those 3 fifth-rounders they've got, could they be a team who perhaps targets a trade up, and it might be moving from 4 to 3 to kind of guarantee you get an edge rusher. It could be from 34, 38 into the 20s to make sure you get an offensive weapon, an edge rusher who falls a linebacker if there's one there. And I think what you're going to see is in a class where teams want to trade back, the Jets, surprisingly, might be a team who wants to trade up because they don't need another bulbous, large draft class to fill out the roster. What they need is difference makers and players who are going to come in and help the roster. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think the draft class is an interesting one. I don't think it's necessarily an exciting one. And there are exciting players, but the way I've kind of looked at the draft classes over the last couple of years, I don't get that same kind of buzz around this one.
No.
I think it's going to be interesting to see how Joe Douglas plays it. And obviously, there is great capital for the Jets to kind of go out and get difference makers. So we'll see how they attack it.
Yeah, I think you're right about the draft classes. It's kind of, it doesn't seem to have a lot of those superstar potential players. You know, anyone can rise that. You know, we've had people jump out of their draft position and become star players. But just as a prospect level, you wouldn't say they automatically have that star potential. But you have a lot of it's decent depth at some positions that really goes right through the draft, where you can get some really good, quality players to fill out the roster and to really contribute to your team. So I think it's not a bad draft. It's just not a star-studded draft like we had last year. And I think obviously that's propped up by when it's a good QB class, it's always going to kind of elevate the class, and this is a particularly poor one. I would say it's probably as poor as we've had since the Geno draft 2013 in terms of the prospects that we're looking at. Yeah, I mean the way I look at it is I've kind of gone all over the place in terms of the positions and who I want to focus on, who are in each position. I think that with the news, with Katie dropping down to 4 a lot in mock drafts, and the idea that he could drop down to the Jets or the Giants at 4 or 5, that's kind of been a kind of a bit of a spot that we've kind of looked at that we thought wasn't really going to be, achievable when we first started looking at the draft at the end of the season. So it's always going to be interesting to see what happens with his stock, and whether it stays roughly where it is right now, which is around that kind of fifth pick, or whether it does kind of he does maintain it and does go in the top 2 or 3. We'll have to see how all these things work out, But I think it's really the idea of picking a player for a position. That's what I'm really thinking about, trying to get as much needs as possible in free agency. And just, I thought I'd introduce, one idea that I have. We can go back to in terms of any particular players afterwards, but I thought introducing the wide receiver trading option, trading for wide receiver, whether it be in the free agency period or before the draft, let's say, and we get that wide receiver in first, then we can use that 10th overall pick. That's everyone's mocking those receivers, whether it be Burks, London, or Wilson, to us at 10. If we can achieve that in a draft where we don't know how good these players are, and I think even the receivers aren't quite as good as what we've seen in terms of the top receivers out of the draft. Of course, Chase is another thing, but I think even people like Waddle and Devonta Smith would be above significantly above the prospects in this class. It does make me think about. I mean, you can have an opinion on that one, but that's why I'm seeing it roughly as I'm seeing it now. We can have a debate on that, but I do think they're a little bit more complete. Do you think that there's a kind of value in trading for a proven wide receiver from another team and solving that one so that we can go maybe cornerback or wherever at number 10?
So I think there's whenever you're looking at a potential trade, and particularly at the wide receiver position and the names who have been floated, there's 3 kind of things. There's how old they are, and this kind of goes across free agency and trading. How old they are kind of that prime age? Are you going to get longevity out of them so they can kind of be a continual presence for Zach Wilson? Then you've got injury concerns. How are they kind of faring? Are they injured often? Is that why they're getting cut? And then there's also the money. When you're talking about someone who's been in the league for a while, these money concerns and how much they want to get paid and what kind of salary you're going to be taking on to take them. These 3 things come up, and I think the problem I have with the wide receiver market is a lot of the wide receivers out there hit 2 of these 3 things. I think with someone like Allen Robinson, you're kind of looking at age and money. Is he on the decline? Is he going to have a Brandon Marshall bounce back? And how much does he want to get paid? Does he want to be hitting those big numbers that he's kind of been linked with? If you're talking about someone like Amari Cooper, you've got the kind of injury questions off the back of last season and the money questions. He's on close to 20 million a year, I think, at the moment, which is, as you start on, that's our entire draft class is the equivalent of that for context. And obviously, how's he bouncing back from the injury? You kind of keep going on someone like Calvin Ridley, who's been linked. While not injury per se directly, we still don't know what his mental state's like. Is he feeling confident? Is he ready to get back on the field?
Yeah.
And then similarly, you've got money questions with him. He's approached the end of his rookie deal and he's already 27. So he's in the prime, but that's quite an old time to be approaching the end of your rookie contract. Are the Jets going to be the team that wants to pay him with all of these questions about him? So I think when you compare those 3 categories, you've got age, injury, and money against taking a wide receiver at 10, I think you're looking at going to get your guy in the draft. And that's where I kind of stand at the moment against those categories. If there was a clean, clear-cut, easy slam dunk wide receiver available, I think you'd take the proven. But
that would be DK Metcalf, who could be potentially available. But then you're talking about money, right? Again, it's one thing. But that's the thing is, with that, you're always going to have one of the 3 because
I can deal with one of the 3. I can absolutely deal with one of the 3. It's when there's 2 of the 3 that I have issues. And I
Right.
think, yeah, one of the three you're going to get. You're going to have to deal with money. You're going to have to deal with someone who's slightly older, and that's totally fine. It's when they're stacked on top of each other.
Right. Yeah.
Comparing that to just going and getting your guy in the draft, that's
Yeah.
where I am.
I do think that I can easily see that. And actually, if they picked any of those top three receivers at 10, I wouldn't be mad about it at this time. From what I've seen, I don't think they're quite as good as last year's class in terms of the top three from last year. But that's I still think they're good prospects and offer a good value. And if the scouting team, more importantly, believe that is, after what they did last year when they combined the that kind of that ability to make, mind meld with the coaching staff exactly what they want. If they feel that that's where they want to go, then I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt of the last year's draft. It was a big success, so I think that's one thing to be considered. I mean, I'm personally more on the same. The thing I worry about the receivers is that I don't believe that, because I don't believe they're a top tier receiver prospect. I have worries about the first year of acclimatizing to the NFL, and we kind of I do value a person who just comes in and just gets the job done and is there for Zach and reliable to contribute and really lead this wide receiver room with Elijah Moore, who we know is going to progress at what we hope they progress, but we know he had a great first season with Corey Davis, who I do believe will bounce back. I think he had a few more kind of mental issues, drops and stuff like that can affect the game. I think he's a better player than we saw last year. I think he'll bounce back. I think that if you get that receiver, yeah, there may be a few things you have to take, into question. But I do believe, like, do you think that any of these players, one, will be as good as those players? You don't know if those players will ever work out to be as good as those players. And two, the first year, like, even if they do become those players in years 3 and 4, ever, maybe they take a couple of years to acclimatize, which a lot of players do. Like Elijah Moore was someone who we hadn't seen very often. Like that last year's draft class and the way they jumped in with Devonta Smith and Waddle and Chase and Elijah Moore, and obviously even Amon St. Brown as well. That was quite like you don't see that often. I know it's happening a bit more often, but you don't see it as often. And that's the worry I have, is that we have this player who's kind of struggling to acclimatize to the NFL, and we spent that draft capital instead of going elsewhere. Like if you were, say, to drop a second round pick for Amari Cooper, take the cap hit. Obviously, the giant the Cowboys take their part of the dead cap, and then you pay the rest. Maybe you rework a deal, make it more cap friendly. Then you can then focus on a Sauce Gardner at 10, like, and then solve that. So that's the proposition I have. The other thought I had is, instead of going, say, offer an actual draft pick and reducing a draft pick, and you've said very eloquently about consolidating our kind of the value that we have, and targeting certain positions. But one way we can actually still keep, say, some of that draft capital to consolidate is actually by using trade. If we can find a trade down partner. Now, I spoke to our friends at the Broncos UK, Cowboys UK, and also Falcons UK as well, to talk about a few draft, just their general thoughts on a few potential kind of scenarios that we could have in the draft to drop down. And I've got them noted down. If you just give me a moment, I'm just going to bring it up. Yeah, so one I had is, okay, here's three draft scenarios that you kind of just have an idea. If you think that if the coaching staff feels that from Kayvon Thibodeau to, say, Jermaine Johnson, or even Carl Loftus, if they've done their analysis, if they think that there isn't as big a drop down personally, if KT's there at 4, and you can and you can trade with the Falcons down to 8, they come up and get KT, you drop down, maybe you get a Carl Loftus or a Jermaine Johnson, whatever your flavour, and you get Calvin Ridley for that, which is the value of 400 points. This is the value chart. I'm using the value chart, but I know it's about outdated, but just as a kind of general, which is roughly a second round pick, that kind of value of, we still keep our 2 second round picks, we move down, we still get, say you would have a Calvin Ridley plus a Jermaine Johnson for the value of a Kayvon Thibodeau, and you keep your 2 second round picks. What I'll present all the 3 scenarios, and you can just have a general idea. The other one was with the Falcons, and they said that Thibodeau would be a potential piece that they could want to go get potentially, for knowing that they're not going to be able to keep Ridley. In terms of the Broncos, obviously they've got to think about cap management and stuff like that. They've obviously signed Cortland Sutton, they've signed Tim Patrick. Jerry Judy has not really taken off, but he obviously comes from a great pedigree. He's still very young, still very cheap as well, and he did have an injury, but you wouldn't say he's injury prone. He just had an injury last year. If you trade down from 4 to 9, if they were to like a QB and they wanted to solve it for say just the value of Jerry Judy without having to give up too much to jump up from 9 to 4, because you're not going to get that great value that you say so what the 49ers had to pay up for Trey Lance. You would have a say another one. It would be a second round pick value for Jerry Judy, but then you move down to 9, and you could pick another two people at 9 and 10. And then the last one is dropping down from pick 10 to 24 with the Cowboys, which is a slightly higher value. That value is about the top of the second round pick for Cooper, and they may want to say, well, we'll jump up to 10, take one of the young receivers to help our caps situation. You get the older receiver who's more proven, and then you also get to still have a pick at pick 24. Do any of those scenarios pique your interest at all?
I think so. Starting with the first two, which involves sliding back from 4, obviously,
Yeah.
and this is all dependent on how the board goes. And I think this discussion for the Jets hypothetically is going to kind of begin and end this week at the combine, based on how Kayvon's interviews go, because Joe Douglas and Salah have spoken numerous times about they want players who love ball, and they want players who are willing to do those extra bits. And these are some of the rumours, discussions, perhaps red flags floating around Kayvon. So if those interviews go well and Salah and Joe Douglas are bought into Kayvon as a prospect and Kayvon what he's going to bring to the Jets, and that they're going to get 100% Kayvon Thibodeau and he's going to be committed, I would, if he was there at 4, I would take those picks. If you're in a situation where Kayvon, Hutchinson and Ekwonu or Neal have gone, both of the edge rushers, and those offers are still on the table, I think I would have to think long and hard about them. And obviously, as I said, like Calvin Ridley, you'd have to have an assurance that he was willing to kind of play and go and be ready to sign a contract. The Jerry Judy one's perhaps slightly harder to jump on, because I don't think he's quite shown the value or the kind of the production so far that warrants sliding back in the first rounds, and you're kind of betting on upside.
His QB play has been really bad, though.
His QB play has been, and this is all the hypotheticals that you have to run through.
Exactly, yeah.
Which makes it that much harder. But I think with someone like Jerry Judy, as a result of that, I think I would try and angle more for a kind of next year pick based on hypotheticals and conditions that he could or could not meet on the field. A bit like the disastrous Colts trade for Carson Wentz.
Right, yeah.
Where you kind of give conditions, and if he hits them, and obviously we're not talking about a first round conditions, or maybe like if he hits like super high ones, then you do say it's a first rounder. But I think that's kind of the angle I'd pursue Jerry Judy under, kind of conditional picks in the 2023 draft,
Right.
rather than sliding back from 4 to 9. The Cooper trade, on the other hand, 10 to 24, I guess I think that's just too far to go back in the first round.
Yeah.
For someone who you're going to be paying that much money to, and with the injury questions on him, I think Cooper discussions kind of hypothetically would begin around pick 38, pick 35, and if you can kind of, perhaps, I don't know, you package 35 and 38 for Cooper in the Cowboys second rounder, or a move along that lines, feels a lot more palatable to me than kind of sliding back 14 places in the first rounder when we kind of consider, and I think you talk about this top tier of wide receivers in this class, you talk about Drake London, Traylon Burks and Garrett Wilson, and for me I think they're not Jamar Chase or Jalen Waddle, but they're certainly kind of around where Devonta Smith was in terms of where they project to be in the NFL.
Okay.
I think that's kind of where you start that kind of conversation. Because I think the upside of taking one of those guys at 10 on the cap money that you're going to get, on the kind of knowing that you're getting someone fresh. And I know Drake London's had their ankle injury, but that's not the kind of injury that really should concern anyone as long as his medicals checks out. And kind of on the age thing that they're going to grow with. So and as you say, there is the question about how long they'll take to develop. But for me, I think wide receivers as a position are getting more and more advanced in college. Those days where their kind of route trees were limited and they weren't asked to do much in college, they're kind of fading out fast, particularly at schools like USC and Ohio State. They're basically playing NFL level receiver games. So I think you can feel confident and optimistic that you're going to get a kind of day one starter.
Yeah, I guess it depends on where where you're at. I mean, I personally, if Source was to drop there at 10, personally, my dream scenario as I look right now is that wide receiver gets sorted out some other way, and then it's KT and Source 4 and 10 for me. What's your preferable duo as you currently stand on March 2nd as we record this?
I think as we all know with pick 4, it kind of the discussion starts at 4 names. You've got KT, you've got Aiden Hutchinson, you've got the 2 offensive tackles or offensive guards, Aquanu and Neal. And I think there's arguments that could be made for all of them. For me, I think if Hutchinson's there, by some miracle, he's the pick. He gives you that big-bodied, strong side edge rusher that Robert Saleh loves, kind of having that guy who can kind of stand up in run defense and kind of get after the quarterback and pass. Is he going to be there? I mean, it's overwhelmingly linked to Detroit, isn't he? He's kind of feels like a home run at that point. I think if Kayvon's there, you also run in that pick for an edge rusher. The Jets have gone too long without solving edge rusher as a position, and I think he has the upside. He has kind of the intangibles. He's slightly smaller than I think Saleh would like. I think Saleh prefers, particularly on that strong side, someone slightly bigger, someone slightly stronger, particularly in the lower body strength to kind of hold down that edge. But I think you still run in that Kayvon pick. You then get into the discussions of Aquanu v Neal, and I think the ability to play guard will give Aquanu the edge here. And I think best case scenario, if you take Aquanu, you line up with Fanton, Becton at tackles, Vera Tucker and Aquanu at guards, and McGovern at centre. And that's best case, and that's presuming that Fant stays around and stays at his level. Becton kind of has a bounce back year and staying fit, but you still added like contingency and protection, so you've got tackle cover, which is so important, and we saw how important it was last year. So those are kind of the 4 names which will be most linked to the Jets. And I think the wild card name, which I know Jets fans don't like, but we're going to kind of continue to see being there, at least until free agency, and it might go away if they sign Marcus Williams. But I think Kyle Hamilton is going to stay in that discussion. And the reason for that is not because he's a safety, but he's someone on the defense who can take the ball away. And I think that's what the Jets are looking for. Someone who can get their hands on the ball and come down with interceptions and be that matchup player that the Jets can move and use all over the field. And I spoke about it at the back end of last season, but almost like the Cardinals use Simmons. Use him if you're going up against a George Kittle, he's your tight end player. If you need coverage over the top help, he's your deep guy. And he will kind of, hopefully, kind of be that kind of back end player. I think 4... traditionally, it's too high for safety, but as I said, this is a slightly strange draft class, and I think you can kind of justify taking Hamilton at 4. I think aside from those 5 guys, I don't really like the value on anyone at 4, really. So I think that's kind of where it stops.
I would love him at 10, but I wouldn't hate Sauce at 4. And I said to you on the chat with David as well. I do think that he is probably, I think he's a better prospect in this draft than Kyle Hamilton is, in terms of what he does, for what he does as a cornerback compared to what Kyle Hamilton does as a safety. I think he's cleaner. He's more pro-ready. He's more. I'm more confident at him as a prospect. I think Kyle Hamilton has got athletic upside through the roof. Like absolutely through the roof. I do feel technique-wise and reading the game, there's been things when I look at the film, there's things that I see that is not as consistent as you want if you're going to take someone at that position, at that level, and pay that money. Because if you think about the value of each contract, right, like it actually comes into, when you're talking about top 5 picks, they're earning a lot of money, and you look at the value relative to, say, like the salary, the franchise tag or the general salary. a top safety is making a decent amount, compared to what he's making, is going to be quite closer to, say, obviously QBs are the ultimate cost saving measure, but I do think these things are when you're building a team and allocating resources, in terms of the cap's going to get smaller, in terms of hopefully we start re-signing players and need money to re-sign future players. These things are going to be important in terms of how much you're paying for each player. So I don't know. Carl Hamilton, I think he's a great player. I wouldn't be that happy with it. I also, going back to the Kwon Neal, I would be fine with Kwon. I don't particularly like the idea too much of doing it, but if he's the guy there, after, say, Neal goes and the two edge rushers go at 2 and 3, I wouldn't hate it. I just feel that, is there an option of not filling out not having to put another asset in the offensive line, even though it's important to do so. I would hope that you would already filled out that to a high level in terms of the backup, like a person who would be a backup to Becton, or Fant in case of an injury or bad play, would be higher than what we had last year. So we wouldn't be in such dire straits to have that insurance at 4. And so I'm not sure about that. And Neal, I don't like Neal at all at 4. I don't like it at all, because I don't feel that he is strictly a tackle. He doesn't feel, he wouldn't have as much value to us at all in terms of sliding in coming in as playing a card in year 1, and let's see where we are in year 2, which we can do with the Kwonu. So Fan, I don't like his game in terms of the run game either, and I think that's so important for our team. I know it's important for everyone, but especially for the way we want to run the ball, and so I think it's important. I don't like his game in the run game. He's obviously a good pass protector. Don't like it at 4. So it's kind of, you're right. It's this class is there's kind of, everyone's got their own position on where they stand on these things, because it's literally, there's no consensus. It's very much like there's not even a small bracket. It's like you can start bringing people like, Carl Hamilton gets brought into the conversation, Sauce Gardner gets brought into the conversation. I mean, even Jermaine Johnson's been brought into the conversation, in terms of,
that's mad, bringing Jermaine Johnson
if we
into the conversation
and there's some of our friends who I respect their opinion and a lot. They are very high on Jermaine Johnson, and like right now, I'm not as familiar with him. I need to do a bit more work on him to know whether I would join them on that one. But that's this class, though, isn't it? This class is like, literally, it's like everyone is just like, forget value, just get the position that you need. If you haven't got the position available for you, get the next guy up, because there is no difference between, say, pick 4 and pick 40. So just get the next one up at the position of need. So I don't know. The free agent period is going to be so important in terms of setting us up for success in this draft, and to really get the best value at each position. So, yeah. Is there anything else in terms of wrapping up the chat on this one? Do you want to say, Matt? No. Let's wrap it up by saying, what's your worst case scenario and best case scenario for 4 and 10 as we stand right now?
I think the worst case scenario for pick 4 is Derek Stingley Jr. I think he just reeks of Jeff Okuda and lack of production and injury worries. And you're kind of banking on inventing a time machine going back to 2019. I think that pick would just throw me off so much. I think in terms of best pick at 4, I think it's Hutchinson. It's kind of that strong side edge rusher who's going to get after the quarterback and who's going to be stout in the run. And having someone like him opposite Carl Lawson, and you get John Franklin Myers inside, that's going to be tough to deal with.
Yeah. And at 10, what's your worst case and best case?
So I think pick 10, I guess you kind of start in terms of best case, begins with looking at wide receivers for me as it stands. And you kind of got Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Treylon Burks to choose from. And I think it is a true pick your poison class. I think as it stands right now, I'd probably go Garrett Wilson. I think he's kind of got that burst, that quickness, that elite separation that will really work in the Jet system. But there's total merits to Burks and to Drake London too. I think you can talk about edge at pick 10 with people like Carl Loftus and Jermaine Johnson. I think Carl Loftus, if he had slightly longer levers, slightly longer arms, would be an elite prospect. As it stands, he's kind of just built as a power rusher and can't really use his arms as well as you'd like. And Jermaine Johnson's kind of got all the upsides and continues to rise up draft boards. I think worst case scenario at 10, I think once you get past that first tier of offensive linemen, and mainly Aquanu, I think any offensive lineman at 10 just doesn't seem to kind of have that value to positional need meet, and people have floated around the ideas of Charles Cross or Linderbaum or Kenyon Green, and these guys just don't feel like the right kind of value add that you could get at 10, and I think there's just players who will be able to make more of an impact. Like if Kyle Hamilton fell to 10, but I think he'll be gone before then, or if Sauce Gardner's there at 10, players who kind of get their hands on the ball, that's kind of a lot more appealing than kind of going down the offensive line route in that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, at 4 and 10, probably my best. I said my best case scenario was Kayvon, or if Hutchinson somehow falls to 4, those two. So one of those two pass rushers, and then paired up with, for me, Sauce Gardner, and then the second option was be a wide receiver if we weren't able to solve it in free agency or via trade. For me, worst case scenario would be Derek Stingley at 4 or Evan Neal at 4 for me. Because the same thing. I just don't feel like there's the value in Evan Neal for what we need, and Derek Stingley does worry me. And then if you push back and say we do take Evan Neal, it'll be Derek Stingley at 10, maybe if even there, or even like you said, a second, Charles Cross or someone like that who doesn't maybe feel exactly what we need. I just feel like we need to really find the best prospects, whoever they are in this draft, and wherever the value is, and I feel like. It's just like this draft class is a real head scratcher. It really is, and I think we'll get some more answers when we go through the combine. We may be able to sort it out a little bit more in terms of the model of that is the general viewpoint on these guys, and we'll see where it heads. But we've got a long way to go. We've got the big free agency period that's going to come. That's going to redefine everything. It's going to reset the conversation. And then obviously we've got the lead up to the draft, which is going to be an exciting time. We are going to be, we'll be back next week as we start to ramp up into the free agent period. We'll be back with the show next week. After the free agency, we'll be having a recap of that, and then going into the draft, which will have plenty of guests as well. We'll try and we'll also pepper in some guests. If David can't join us, we're trying to look for some people that can fill in as the third voice on the pod. That's what we're trying to do. It's always a little bit easier said than done. With us being in the UK, a lot of our guests are in the US, so that sometimes can be a bit of a tricky thing to manage, but we'll try and work that out. But we've enjoyed coming back. Matt, how you enjoyed the first episode back of the new season?
Yeah, it's been good to get back into the swing of things, start talking about, and I've completely got back into the world of it. So looking forward to draft, free agency, all of this good stuff that we can break down. We are going to go absolutely crazy. It's going to be a really fun ride. But guys, so enjoy the weekend, enjoy the week, and like I said, we roll on to through past the combine into free agency, and we'll catch you next week.